Hi, it's Maria, and today I'm doing another video that I think I'll put in the Forgiveness to Love series or my Stolen Inheritance. Anyway, the title today is Why Does Family Destroy Family? And it's just ridiculous, isn't it? But divorce is actually at the top of the list in case you hadn't figured that one out. I think you probably have. And so, but really any litigation, even jury duty. Remember when we get those envelopes in the mail and we just kind of cringe and all of a sudden we get like this migraine thinking, I don't want to go there and do jury duty. With divorce, for sure, there are custody battles and psychiatric evaluations and expert testimony and guardians ad litem and child support and supervised visitation. And then there's appealing all those decisions that didn't go in our favor. Yeah. And the thing is that it's just another family destroyed. And it just happens every day and happens in courtrooms throughout our country. And we've become so anesthetized to it that we think, oh, well, that's just the way it is. Well, it's beyond tragic. Families are destroyed and it's just so pitiful. And then you have estate litigation. And we all know about estate litigation because we have parents and we have grandparents and we have aunts and uncles and friends who may want to bequeath something to us. And people are fighting over things. And even the thought of siblings stealing and fighting over their parents' belongings, not something that even semi-conscious human beings would even entertain, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. And so meanwhile, it also brings shivers of disrespect in terms of the people that have passed and the generations actually that have worked so hard to amass that wealth that they want to pass on to their children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews and whatever. Then I mean, it just gets crazier and crazier. It's like shocking. Then you also have children who are involved in their parents' deaths for the money, for the inheritance, which is, the whole thing is just so chilling. It really belongs on some of those murder shows on television, the FBI files and things like that. And basically, that's what happened in my family, as many of you have heard from my Forgiveness to Love videos that are on mariahaiti.com and on YouTube. But people become emboldened to take the law into their own hands, right? They say, well, you don't have to wait until your parents or grandparents are deceased. Just skip that generation and just take the money that's yours because you're going to get it ultimately anyway. And so it's just so ridiculous. And then you have people that are paid off. They get payouts and payoffs and bribes and greasy palms. Where does that term come from? And blackmail. And finally, things are really starting to become exposed, which is just wonderful because all of this subterfuge has been going on behind the scenes and people didn't even know it existed. And then they'd be blindsided when it happened to them or to a loved one of theirs. And fortunately, here we are hearing more and more of how things really are and how they have been run for years and years and decades and who knows, even centuries and centuries. That's why I'm making these videos, which is to help you become more aware so that you may be able to protect yourself should you find yourself in a situation similar to what I have had to experience, which is what many people have gone through, right? With 50% of all first marriages ending in divorce, right? And 75% of all subsequent marriages ending in divorce. There's just so much fighting, and it is kind of disgusting, actually. But I've made over 60 videos, I think, documenting what has happened to me. And so it's truth. And this truth has been, as we said, it's been covered up. So now it is good because it's all starting to come out. And as we hear about it, sometimes we just want to gag. We go, oh my gosh, I can't even believe that people are actually committing these crimes. It's like dark and evil and selfish and greedy, and it's like a horror show. And so there's a heartache and abuse that takes its toll on our physical bodies, right? And here we are taking vitamins and trying to eat healthy and not drink and not smoke and not do whatever so that we can fortify our immune systems. And yet we have dark energy that is just kind of chipping away at our health just to try to destroy us. And so anyway, it's pretty sad. And in another video, it was more of a spiritual video. I titled it From Victim to Hero. And it talks about the lessons that we are actually learning as we go through this. And it's based on a spiritual perspective. And so I'm not discounting that. That is a wonderful way of looking at it. And that is the way we need to look at it for our own sanity and for our own spiritual evolution as human beings. At the same time, this video is more about what really happens and how we feel as we're going through it. We feel like a punching bag for our own family. And there's jealousy and envy and sibling rivalry. And there's so much talk nowadays about the evolution of humanity, and our little blue-green planet. And so when you imagine that people are actually fighting over who gets their parents' house and who gets the car and who gets the jewelry and who gets the good china and the crystal stemware that's sitting in the dining room credenza, right? And I think it's been used maybe 3 times in 25 years or whatever, but it just sits there and it's just on display. And then when people pass, everybody's fighting for it. And so it's just a lot of ego. And so for me, I've been attacked now for over 30 years. It's hard to imagine. I just shrivel and just go, oh my gosh. But, and for outright stealing, actually. And it kind of, it's my gag reflex that has been in full swing for way, way too long. And in fact, people behave so pitifully, and they're vibrating so low that we actually feel embarrassed for them. Because they're clueless and they jump into the boxing ring to fight for this, and it takes greed to a point off the charts, right? And so then there's malice and there's profound cruelty involved in all this fighting and all this animosity, and then there are battles. Oh, my phone, what happened to my phone? 1 second. Okay. So we have battles between family members, and in family law, I told you about that. With over half of all marriages ending in divorce, there are quite a few family law battles. And in estate litigation, that's probate. Probate is the distribution of assets in an estate. And when one person says, Mom left this to me, and then the other person says, no, Mom left this to me. And then the one says, no, I want it, and it's mine. And then the other one says, no, it's mine. And then pretty soon they're saying, by the way, what are we fighting about? It becomes a game, but it's really a gruesome game. And so as far as I'm concerned, I'm an American. And I'm proud to be an American. And I live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And I love seeing our flag flying in the wind. Wait, I think a hair was flying in the wind here. And I'm humbled when I see like a Marine in camouflage, who's standing in line in front of me in the bank. And I just want to kind of run up to him and hug him and thank him, because I really believe that he's doing his best to protect us. And so it actually hurts to think of all that they go through in order to serve their country and to protect us. And so while they fight their adversary in far, far away lands, as we're hearing on the news daily now about all the issues around the world, the military battles, we fight our adversaries in legal battles at home in our local courthouse. And when you think about it, it's shameful. It truly is. And so while our soldiers fight to kill the opposition that speaks a different language, practices a different religion, and is of a different culture, there's fighting at home to destroy the opposition. But get this, we were once the love of their life, right? We bared our soul to them in those tender moments between the sheets. And they were beyond ecstatic as they tearfully welcomed the very babies that we created together. And then what happened? Or our sibling lures and bribes our own child to join her, to squeeze us out of things that belong to us. As our children hear, oh, you don't have to wait until, your mother's old and sick. She's got the money now. Well, we're just going to take it. You deserve it. You need it while you're young, and you can have fun, and you can travel, and you can buy anything you want and do anything you want. She doesn't need it. And so you just think, oh my God. And so all bets are off then when there's forgery and perjury and bribes, and we reach a new level, really a shameful level of disrespect and criminality. And it's interesting because in armed combat, we follow the leader, right? It's a sergeant or a colonel or a general, while at home, we follow the lead of an attorney and his groupies and the judge, right? And so in both cases, the goal is to win, and to win big, and really big. And because it's a game, right? And it's way bigger than chess, really. And so the bigger the win, the greater the loss, right, for the other side. And after all, that's what we're here for, right? Because we aren't going to show any mercy. And we're going to be like big thugs bludgeoning the enemy, yeah? And it's go get them, right? And if you don't have that killer instinct, let me tell you, it's, come on, be a man. Don't let that gold digger take your money. It's yours. You're the one who earned it. She's just a nut and a slut. Yeah. And you don't want to fund her Cancun vacations with her new boyfriend, do you? And the other side blabs, don't let that overgrown bully leave you high and dry. After all, you wasted your best years with that bozo. And now he dumps you for Barbie. Hey, is she even legal? And he hasn't been inappropriate with the children, has he? And so that's just so gross. But it is what happens. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. I know of people who have gone through it. And it really happens. And because we can't do it alone, we need the expertise of leaders. And so our family fortune is milked like a golden calf until there's nothing left. Such was my 5-year divorce battle from 1996 to 2004, actually, when you count supplemental judgments. So it was, and then there was an 8-year civil court defamation battle to 2012. And now the current 14-year probate battle, where my parents said, we have 2 girls, and they will split the estate 50-50. It was written in the will, it was written in the trust, yet suddenly, and out of nowhere, new documents appeared and said that one daughter gets 100%. 100% of many millions, while the other gets nothing. Oh, go ahead, just put her out on the street, right? And one grandchild gets their mom's home and leaves her homeless. Sounds insane to me, right? All perjury, forgery to steal, and over 100 attorneys and judges and experts and witnesses were involved. It's just like a giant shredder of client funds, truly, and it happens every day. My situation was somewhat unique in that there was a rerun. It was in a different state, different characters, but basically the same criminals were involved because it was done twice. I not only lost everything once, but I lost it twice. So I lost everything in my marital settlement, which was a rather large marital estate. And then after they took everything and they had Allied van lines, trucks coming and taking everything from me, there was a repeat in terms of the inheritance. So they stole my inheritance too. So that was twice. Both times I was cleaned out of everything. And so the financial accounts and the homes and the clothes and the children and the cars and the computers and the writing and even my panties and my toothbrushes, and let alone friends and my health and my reputation and quality years of life, for sure. While Maria believed in justice, Maria believed in truth, where the outcome would be what was best for all, and especially for the children, because it was mandated that for their protection, they would have their own attorneys. Yet, he actually threatened my children. And when I reported him, I was told he had immunity because he was on the board of this attorney disciplinary board. And so he was conveniently completely protected. And so they wouldn't investigate, they wouldn't do anything. They said, well, he's, part of the board. So that's the way it is. And I do remember when I'd walk in a courthouse and I saw men and women standing outside of their respective courtrooms, shouting at their soon-to-be ex and even at their attorneys. And all the while I thought, hey, this is no way to treat one another. It's time to play fair, right? Because we're all in this together. And rather than destroy ourselves as we attempt to destroy the other side, why don't we just smarten up and limit the carnage lying in the street, right? Because we were blowing through our own children's college funds and educational funds and reserves and whatever. And so we were actually funding our attorneys' children's college. And so, as well as their spring break ski trips, right, to Switzerland and beach jaunts to Rio. I mean, really, what the hell are we doing here? There's something really wrong with this picture, wouldn't you say? This is America, and yet it's happening all over the world, just as our soldiers are dying from the attacks of the opposition, right? So are Americans slowly dying from the disgrace of family dysfunction and vengeance. And I remember pledging allegiance to the flag. And yet here I am, embroiled in a judicial system where I saw no intent to back down, no intent to negotiate, no intent to bring back dignity into the halls of justice, no fairness, no equity, no honesty, and no freedom. And if you think I'm exaggerating, you should have been where I was, and you would understand that that it's almost like a snowball. You know how snowballs, you just keep rolling it and it gets bigger and bigger. Well, that's what happens because the other side that keeps winning just becomes more and more empowered. And so then they do the most ridiculous things and no one's going to stop them from it. So things get very much out of hand. And so they lose their self-respect, right? And if they don't have self-respect, then they certainly can't respect anyone else. Right? Because you must first respect yourself before you can pass that along. Just like you must first love yourself before you can love another. You must first have compassion for yourself before you can have compassion for another. And so the way we treat ourselves is the way we treat others. So when I would see some horrific behavior, I would kind of just go, oh my gosh, I'm just so glad I'm not married to him, because if he's treating me as a stranger and the way that he was behaving in the courtroom, can you imagine what he'd be like at home? I just, when the mask falls off, I mean, it's chilling actually. And so I realized that we have a primitive, primordial mentality, right? Where it's still all about the fight. and where brawn supersedes brain. Yes, now that's hardly a recipe for success. Who are we kidding other than ourselves, for sure? So just like our servicemen who see bloodshed and count the casualties, we can count the lying, the cheating, the stealing, the slandering losses in both divorce and in probate. And then we're baffled, right? And we ask, oh my gosh, what the hell happened? Duh. Well, it's right there, and it happens all the time. After divorce, I was advised to talk and write about it because my experience was so horrific and so off the charts and so dramatic, really. And so I wrote a letter describing it, and many of you have already heard this part of it. But I wrote a letter, and then, of course, I was sued for it by my ex. A different letter was put into evidence, which is certainly illegal, unlawful, and unconstitutional. But the judge openly said he knew the ex's family for over 30 years. And so there was no surprise when I realized that they were going to allow the wrong letter to be put into evidence. Anyway, it really screamed that there were truths in the real letter that were so damning and so irrefutable that they weren't even to be whispered, much less discussed in that courtroom, right? And so I lost. And surprise, and I owed him $10 million, actually 9.7. But it was the largest verdict in history, the exact amount that was in one of my father's accounts. And so now with statutory interest, I think it's probably 30, 40, 50, who knows how many millions. It's interesting because he died a while ago. But in my 80s, I would have owed an ex $500 million. Now, doesn't that sound just wonderful, right? And so even Johnny Depp couldn't top that one, right? And so for years and years and years and years, it has just been one thieving situation after another. And in the thieving, of course, was my home. And so I wasn't even allowed to go and pick up my belongings from my home. And my sister had ordered that if I even approached the condominium building that had my condo on the beach in Florida, the police were to be summoned, and I was going to go to jail. Oh my gosh. And for going to my own home. But anyway, they had changed the locks. Then when I decided, okay, well, I have to fight this, right? This is just beyond ridiculous. I was told that there was not one attorney in the entire state of Florida that was allowed to represent me. Now, how does that happen? How can someone be allowed or not be allowed to represent someone? I think we are all entitled to legal representation. I repeat, I'm an American. I'm proud to be American because I live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, right? And I love seeing our flag flying in the wind. And I'm humbled when I see a Marine in camouflage at the bank. If they smile at me, I just want to run up and hug them, right? Because they are doing their best to protect us. So I decided that I really am the poster child for legal abuse. And I sent letters all over Washington and to governors and senators and congressmen and mayors and attorney generals and you name it, and all sorts of departments and department heads and everything. But what I realized is that no one wants to deal with it. It's like it doesn't exist. There's just, what's your problem, Maria? So you lost your home, so you lost even every dime you had, so it was stolen by your own family. So, those things happen. Get over it. And so, anyway, in that one video that I have from, it's from victim to hero, I did get over it, and I am getting over it, and we will get over it. And that still does not negate the fact that these things go on and they're not appropriate and they are contrary to decency and they are contrary to what America represents to us and for us. And so I did happen to Google my sister, and the first thing I saw was that she's a bigwig donor to the Republican Party. And I thought, well, there goes my money. So maybe that's where my money's gone. Maybe that's where her money and my money and all the millions and millions that our parents left us, it's being spent somewhere. And I truly have no idea, so I really shouldn't even say that. I just do know that my ex and I, as we were married in Chicago, he would go and he would write a lot of checks to aspiring politicians, right? Because he really wanted them to go into office, and they need money in order to campaign, right? And yet the funny thing was, and I didn't understand it until I learned what was going on in his mind, is he didn't really care who won. And so he would donate to both parties because all he wanted was to be able to pick up the phone and call and say, I need a favor, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. And because he had given them so much money, they would accommodate him. Actually, I've told this story before too, is that it was on our honeymoon because my ex-husband was my father's stockbroker. And when we were on our honeymoon, he had told me that he had married me for my father's money. And get this, that he would have married my brother if I had had one. And after processing that news, that bit of news, I said, let's get an annulment. And he said, no, I don't want to be divorced. I want to be widowed, because people feel sorry for widowers and they hug them and they invite them to their homes for dinner. And I said, well, that doesn't sound very good to me. And he shrugged and he said, well, that's just too bad. And the mask had totally fallen off. And it was not to be worn around family, but only to be worn around strangers and clients and social friends and the really, really rich. And so I didn't understand why I didn't qualify, because he knew how much I had, or he knew how much my father had. But anyway, he became a Wall Street investment banker, and we moved to New York, and Dr. Jekyll retired, and I was married to Mr. Hyde. And in fact, it was so bad that I left New York and went from medicine to law. And like Gordon Gekko in the movie Wall Street, the money just poured in, dinners and galas and theater and opera, and it was busy and it was exciting and it was fun. But I couldn't understand why I was feeling ill for so very long. And it wasn't until my divorce attorneys told me that my oh so loving soon-to-be ex boasted that he was adding little things to my food. And when I wasn't getting sick enough fast enough, he ended up paying landscapers to spray me with one of those lawn pesticides while I was standing outside of a neighboring house. And so I became so toxic and so sick that for 5 years I was the woman in the bubble. And some of you have already heard this part, but this is just, it truly is. And I could only eat like one ingredient at a time. Fortunately, I believe in miracles for sure. I filed for divorce. And then Mr. Hyde came back, and he was then conspiring with my sibling, right, to take everything. But I had no idea back then. I guess I was just fighting to stay alive back then. But anyway, so that was all part of the 30 years. It started then of legal abuse once I began the divorce proceedings. You know, many of us are just so traumatized that we just want to hand over everything in order to tourniquet the bleeding, right? Because it's just too painful, and they drag it out, and it's for years and years and years. And in terms of my inheritance, I wasn't even notified of court dates because I was stripped of everything, right? And I didn't even have an address. I became a homeless person, truly, and walked the ghetto and spent the nights in 3 different shelters. And now I can laugh, you know, and say, oh, I went from limos to flip-flops. But actually, it was quite ridiculous. And I didn't even have a bicycle, truly. And so it was just a travesty of justice. It was pitiful. And yet it was so extreme that I realized that part of my calling, if not all of it, is to shed light on what can happen in a worst case scenario, you know? And I am so grateful and feel so blessed to be able to share this with you. And if my experience even paves the way for others to avoid some of the pitfalls that I had, and also by bringing awareness to the situation, may things change in such a way where no one has to lose their children, lose their home, lose all their finances, lose the respect of others, lose their reputation, because there's just so much slander and lies and blockages. There were so many blockages. I wasn't even allowed to get a job because I hear that my family would pick up the phone and call and say, oh no, she didn't lose her home. She was written out of the will because she's mentally ill, or she's a prostitute, or she's a druggie, or she's an alcoholic, or what do people want to say? Because they want to paint a picture of you so that the crimes that they've committed against you don't seem so ridiculous, right? They just don't seem so cruel, right? She just lost her home on her own. We had nothing to do with it, right? We didn't forge all those documents. We didn't perjure ourselves in court. Oh no. Not us. I'm comparing the situation between our soldiers who are fighting for freedom while the enemy rapes and pillages, and we have families on home soil that prowl in order to thieve and rob and burglarize and stalk and steal. Yes. Then after the shelters, because I wanted to raise awareness, and I made a video, in fact, titled "A National Crisis." And that's, I think, on YouTube. And they asked me to leave the shelter because they said I was discussing too many things that were actually going on in the shelter, and interviewing people and showing people that some of these people were former physicians, former attorneys, former business people, and yet they had fallen on hard times. And so they had lost their fortunes. And I didn't hear of anyone who lost it in litigation from an ex-husband like my situation, but nonetheless, people do lose it. And so then I decided to lease a car, and I leased a car, and it was a Honda Odyssey, and I've made several videos on that, in fact, and it was sabotaged by my sibling, or at least I was told that, and because I would be